Let me take you back to that moment when my world turned upside down. I was 23, working my third shift at Joe's Diner, when my brother Marcus walked in wearing a Rolex that screamed authenticity. Not something we could usually afford. My name's Emma, and until that day I believed we were your typical working-class family. Our two-bedroom apartment felt like a shoebox, but Mom and Dad always said that's all we could manage. They drilled into Marcus and me the value of hard work and frugality. Money doesn't grow on trees, Dad would grumble while patching my sneakers yet again instead of buying new ones. While other kids sported shiny backpacks, I learned to mend and make do. Summers weren't for vacations. They were spent at home because times were tight. Marcus and I shared a room until I was 15. Our twin beds separated by a threadbare curtain that barely offered privacy. Every penny was stretched thin. Every expense carefully considered. By 12, I was babysitting. At 16, flipping burgers. And by 18, scrubbing dishes. When I graduated high school, I'd saved $5,000. Only to find it laughable against college tuition bills. You'll have to take out loans like everyone else, Mom said, her voice heavy with what I thought was guilt. After community college, I rented a tiny studio apartment and worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at a bookstore, and nights back at Joe's. Meanwhile, Marcus had skipped college altogether. Dad oddly supported this, saying, "Not everyone's cut out for school." But Marcus's life didn't add up. His flexible schedule, his constant cash flow. The first crack appeared one Sunday morning when I visited our parents' place unannounced. On the kitchen counter beneath junk mail, I found an envelope from an investment firm. The number visible through the window made my blood run cold. $847,000. I told myself I must have misread it, but then came more signs: Mom's thrift store clothes with designer labels, Dad's new car deal, their sudden business trips, the hushed phone calls. Then there was Marcus strolling into Joe's like he owned the place. "Oh, and Mom and Dad are heading to the Maldives next week," he casually mentioned. The Maldives? The same parents who couldn't afford a weekend at the lake? How can they afford the Maldives? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marcus just smirked. "You're not still buying all that, are you?" He left before I could press further. That night, surrounded by overdue bills in my cramped apartment, I opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I started digging bank accounts, property records, anything I could access. What I found shattered the story I'd believed my entire life. My parents were hiding millions, and their web of lies went far deeper than money. My investigation revealed they owned 3 properties through a shell company. A beachfront condo in Miami, a ski lodge in Aspen, and a villa in the south of France worth over $12 million combined. Using Mom's maiden name, I uncovered an even bigger network of companies and investments. The construction company where Marcus supposedly worked grunt-level jobs? Family-owned, with Dad's friend merely a hired manager. Every sleepless night juggling shifts, every tear over rejected scholarship applications, every skipped meal. It was all part of their elaborate charade. A cruel performance designed to teach us character, though I wouldn't understand that fully until later. I confronted Marcus first. In my tiny studio, I slammed property records onto the coffee table. "Care to explain this?" His smug grin faltered, replaced by something resembling guilt. "It's complicated," he began, but under my glare, he dropped the pretense. "Fine. It's exactly what it looks like. Dad's been running this twisted game for years. He calls it building character. A test." I choked out. "You've been putting me through hell for a test?" Marcus leaned forward, his Rolex gleaming in my dim apartment light. "Yeah, it sucks. But once you prove yourself, they let you in. That's what happened with me. You just haven't passed yet." "Passed what exactly?" I demanded. "Starving? Sacrificing my mental health for ramen noodles and rent." He shrugged. "It's not personal. It's just their way. They're actually really proud of you. They talk about how hard you work, how independent you are. They think you're stronger for it." I stared at him, vision blurring. "Get out," I managed through clenched teeth. After he left, I sat in silence for hours, my laptop open on the coffee table, property records glaring at me like accusations. The next day, I called in sick to all 3 jobs, a first in years. If they wanted a test, fine. I'd show them exactly what their experiment had created. For the next week, I gathered evidence. Public records, shell companies, investments, assets. I compiled Instagram posts showing a life I never knew existed. Mom on a yacht. Dad at the Monaco Grand Prix. Marcus grinning beside luxury cars. The captions mocked me. Another unforgettable family vacation in paradise. Last year's post from Aspen coincided with when I told them I couldn't visit because I had to work. That Christmas, Marcus got a car. I got silence. This wasn't just about exposing them anymore. This was about reclaiming every shred of power they'd stolen from me. They thought they built character. No, they built something far more dangerous. And they had no idea what was coming. The evidence I'd gathered felt like a ticking time bomb in my tiny studio apartment. Every document, every photograph, every journal entry confirmed what I'd suspected, but desperately hoped wasn't true. My entire life had been an elaborate experiment orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I started with the construction company where Marcus supposedly worked. My business degree, earned through years of sacrifice and sleepless nights, finally found its purpose. During my lunch break at the coffee shop, I swapped my barista apron for my best secondhand blazer and marched into their office. Posing as an insurance auditor conducting a routine review, I introduced myself to the manager, the same friend my parents claimed employed Marcus. The Bennetts? They're fantastic owners, he gushed, completely unaware of my true intentions. Very hands-on with the business. He handed over files without hesitation, trusting my fabricated credentials. What I found inside made my stomach churn. The company wasn't just successful. It was wildly profitable, raking in millions annually. Millions that could have paid for my education, covered my medical bills, or simply kept food in my fridge while I worked myself to exhaustion. Next, I turned my attention to their real estate holdings. The timing of each purchase stabbed me anew. The Aspen Ski Lodge? Bought the same month I'd been forced to drop out of university for a semester because I couldn't afford tuition. The Mediterranean yacht? Acquired while I was pulling double shifts to cover an emergency dental surgery. Each property represented another stolen opportunity, another lie stacked upon lies. But the real breakthrough came from someone I never expected: Maria, their housekeeper of 15 years. I found her through social media and arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe. She was hesitant at first, her eyes wary as she studied me across the table. When I explained who I was, her demeanor shifted dramatically. "You're the daughter?" she asked, her voice soft with disbelief. "The one they never talk about." Her words hit me like a physical blow. But I swallowed the pain and nodded. Over coffee, Maria revealed years of overheard conversations and incriminating details. She'd seen it all: the lavish parties celebrating profitable investments, the extravagant purchases, the bank statements and investment reports carelessly left in plain sight. And she'd taken photos. Dozens of them. They had these parties, she explained, scrolling through her phone. Big celebrations whenever their investments paid off. They called them success parties. The video she showed me made my stomach churn. It was from 3 months ago, the same week I'd been hospitalized for exhaustion after working triple shifts. There were my parents, dressed in designer clothes, clinking champagne glasses with Marcus. "To our perfect little family," Dad toasted in the video, his voice dripping with pride. "And to Emma, wherever she is, still building that character." Maria's revelations didn't stop there. "They talked about you sometimes," she said quietly, "about how the experiment was going. Your mother. She kept a journal." That single word sent shivers down my spine. A journal. This was the key, the final piece of the puzzle I needed. 2 days later, when my parents left for the Maldives, Maria confirmed the house would be empty except for her. This was my chance. Breaking into their home, my childhood home, felt surreal. The memories of shared meals and family game nights clashed violently with the reality of what I now knew. Maria had left the journal hidden in the guest room dresser, just as we'd planned. My hands trembled as I grabbed it and fled before my resolve could falter. Later that night, sitting alone in my apartment, I opened the leather-bound book. My mother's tidy handwriting filled the pages, chronicling every detail of their twisted experiment. The first entry, dated 16 years ago, made my blood run cold. "Thomas's experiment with the children is proceeding as planned. Marcus shows signs of breaking already. He's begun asking questions about our finances. But Emma, she's perfect for this. So trusting, so determined. We'll see how long she lasts. I had to stop reading, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't about teaching responsibility or building character. This was calculated cruelty, a sick game to see how far they could push me. Another entry from 5 years ago twisted the knife further. Emma got accepted to Princeton today. Full scholarship, too. Thomas says we should discourage her. An Ivy League education might expose her to people who know about our businesses. Better to keep her local, struggling. It's fascinating how adaptable she is. Every page revealed more of their manipulation. The sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd given up. They weren't collateral damage. They were intentional. The most chilling entry was dated just last month. The experiment has yielded unexpected results. Emma's determination to succeed despite manufactured hardship has surpassed all projections. Thomas suggests we might need to increase pressure. Perhaps orchestrate a job loss or medical emergency. Marcus thinks it's gone too far, but he won't intervene. He enjoys his position too much to risk it. But what I found next made my blood freeze. Tucked between the journal's pages was a letter from my grandmother, written shortly before her death. The fortune is not yours to use as you please. It belongs to Marcus and Emma, held in trust with strict conditions to ensure they raise responsibly. Betraying this trust would be a crime, and a betrayal of everything our family stands for. It wasn't even their money. The entire fortune, the lifestyle they paraded while I struggled, was meant for me and Marcus. They'd violated the trust and committed fraud on a scale that could ruin them. I photographed every page of the journal, the letter, and every incriminating line. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and began composing emails, to the family lawyer named in the letter, to the trust administrators, and to financial regulators. The emails I sent that night from my tiny studio apartment triggered a chain reaction that would dismantle the life my parents had so carefully constructed. As I sat at Joe's diner 3 days later, watching their faces flash across the evening news, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. The prominent business couple under investigation for trust fund fraud. The headline blinked in bright red letters above their shocked expressions. James Harrison, my grandmother's attorney, found me at the diner. His tailored suit and polished briefcase seemed out of place among the greasy countertops and worn booths. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in estate law, "I believe you've uncovered something quite extraordinary." Over coffee, he laid out the full extent of what my parents had done. The trust, worth $75 million, was meant to provide equal opportunity for Marcus and me. Instead, they'd systematically drained my half while presenting a facade of poverty. The journal, combined with the documents from the storage unit, painted an undeniable picture of their crimes. Every fraudulent transfer, every manipulated statement, every forged signature. They documented their own destruction. The fallout came swiftly. Their accounts were frozen within hours of landing from the Maldives. Reporters camped outside their penthouse as investigators combed through their assets. The media frenzy exposed everything. The yachts, the mansions, the offshore accounts. All built on stolen money while I scrubbed dishes and skipped meals. Marcus's panicked texts started flooding in. "What have you done? They're investigating me too." He had good reason to be afraid. His complicity, his willingness to benefit from the stolen funds while knowing the truth, it made him just as guilty. Within weeks, the designer suits and flashy watches were traded for an orange jumpsuit that matched our parents'. Their attempts at damage control were pathetic. Mom called first, her voice breaking as she begged for forgiveness. "We only wanted to make you stronger," she sobbed. Dad followed with promises to make things right, claiming their actions were motivated by love. Marcus tried to shift blame, saying he was just following orders. But no amount of pleading could erase the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. The trial was a media circus. The journal alone was damning enough to guarantee lengthy prison sentences. Each entry chronicled their calculated cruelty, their pride in watching me struggle. The letter from my grandmother sealed their fate, clear proof they'd violated the trust's conditions. Justice came swiftly and mercilessly. My parents and Marcus were convicted of fraud and embezzlement. The court ordered the stolen assets returned to the trust and appointed independent trustees to oversee it. As the gavel fell, I felt something unexpected: emptiness. This wasn't the cathartic moment I'd imagined. Watching them led away in handcuffs didn't fill the void of lost years or heal the wounds of betrayal. Instead, it left me wondering about the nature of justice and whether any sentence could truly balance the scales. With the assets returned to the trust, I suddenly found myself in possession of wealth beyond imagination. Yet instead of immediate relief, I felt paralyzed by choice. The tiny studio apartment where I plotted my revenge now felt like a cocoon. I wasn't ready to leave. So I kept working at Joe's Diner, not because I needed to, but because those years of hard work had taught me more about perseverance and dignity than my parents' experiment ever could. The foundation idea came to me gradually. At first, I simply donated anonymously to struggling students whose stories reminded me of my own. Then one day, a young woman approached me after her shift. "You remind me of someone who understands," she said, describing her battle with tuition bills and part-time jobs. Something clicked in that moment. I began building the foundation during my rare days off. It started small scholarships for community college students, emergency funds for those facing financial crises. But as word spread and the scope expanded, I realized I needed to step away from Joe's entirely. On my last day, the regulars threw me a surprise party. Even grumpy old Mr. Thompson, who never tipped more than a quarter, handed me a crisp $100 bill. "For whatever you're planning," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. The Emma Bennett Foundation officially launched 6 months after my parents' conviction. We provided full scholarships, living stipends, mental health support. Everything I'd been denied. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents' cruelty had inadvertently inspired me to help others avoid the struggles they'd forced upon me. Yet despite the financial windfall and the foundation's success, I couldn't escape the lingering questions about family, identity, and purpose. I visited them occasionally in prison, though these visits left me feeling hollow. Mom still insisted their actions were justified. "We only wanted to make you stronger," she wrote in her letters. And in a twisted way, they had succeeded. But strength manifests differently than they'd intended. Their experiment had forged in me a resilience they couldn't comprehend, a determination to rise above their cruelty rather than succumb to it. True character, I realized, isn't built through deprivation and manipulation. It's revealed in how we respond to adversity, in our capacity for compassion despite pain, in our ability to transform suffering into purpose. The foundation work consumed me in the best possible way. Every scholarship awarded, every student supported, every success story built a new kind of wealth, one that couldn't be measured in dollars or properties. I found purpose in transforming their cruelty into compassion, their manipulation into meaningful change. I hired Maria first. She became our office manager, her intimate knowledge of my parents' schemes proving invaluable as we rebuilt trust with the community. Her presence in the foundation's headquarters was both symbolic and practical, a reminder of where we'd come from and how far we needed to go. Other staff members joined gradually, each bringing their own stories of overcoming adversity. The Emma Bennett Foundation quickly gained national attention. We weren't just handing out scholarships, we were building entire support systems. Free mental health counseling, career guidance, networking opportunities. Everything I'd been denied during my own struggles. The media coverage helped, though I avoided interviews personally. Instead, I let our beneficiaries tell their stories, their voices more powerful than any soundbite I could offer. Yet despite the foundation's success, certain questions haunted me. What made people like my parents capable of such calculated cruelty? How could they look at their child struggling and see only an experiment rather than a person in pain? These questions led me to pursue a graduate degree in psychology, focusing on family dynamics and inherited trauma. Joe's Diner became my classroom between shifts, textbook sharing space with order slips and coffee cups. My research revealed disturbing patterns. My parents' actions weren't unique. History was littered with similar cases of wealthy families manipulating their children through deprivation. But understanding the pattern didn't make it hurt less. It did, however, help me process my experiences differently. Their experiment hadn't just been about money or character. It had been about control, about wielding power over another person's reality. The letters from prison continued arriving. Mom's desperate attempts to justify their actions grew more frequent, while Dad remained silent except for occasional legal appeals. Marcus's correspondence was different. Filled with anger at first, then resentment, and finally something approaching remorse. "You were right," he wrote after 3 years in prison. "They never really loved us. They just used us." His words echoed my darkest fears but also offered unexpected clarity. I began visiting them regularly, not out of forgiveness but out of fascination. Watching them stripped of their wealth and status revealed truths they'd hidden even from themselves. Mom's carefully constructed facade crumbled without her designer clothes and social circles. Dad retreated into himself, his once booming voice reduced to whispers. Their punishment wasn't just incarceration. It was identity crisis. These visits taught me perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. True strength isn't forged through suffering inflicted by others. It emerges when we choose how to respond to that suffering. My parents thought they were building character by making life harder. They were wrong. Character is choosing kindness when you have every reason to be cruel. It's extending grace when none is deserved. It's finding meaning in pain and using it to create something better. Marcus's release last year marked a turning point. He showed up at the Foundation's offices unannounced, looking lost in clothes that no longer fit. Without discussing it, Maria handed him a mop and pointed him toward the bathrooms. He worked there for months, cleaning toilets and emptying trash cans, before asking for more responsibility. Now he manages our construction apprenticeship program, helping other former inmates rebuild their lives. Our relationship remains complicated. Trust doesn't return easily when it's been so thoroughly broken. But watching him interact with our beneficiaries, seeing genuine pride in their accomplishments rather than possessive control, gives me hope. Maybe redemption is possible, even for those who've caused great harm. Maybe forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but rather choosing to move forward anyway. The Foundation recently purchased a property that makes me smile every time I see it. A small diner not unlike Joe's. We've converted it into a training restaurant where students can gain real-world experience while pursuing their degrees. The grand opening was emotional. Many of my old co-workers attended, along with dozens of beneficiaries whose lives had changed because of what I'd endured. Standing behind the counter on opening night, I realized something profound. My parents' greatest failure wasn't stealing my inheritance or orchestrating their twisted experiment. Their real mistake was underestimating what they'd created. They thought they were building a stronger version of their daughter, someone who could survive anything they threw at her. Instead, they'd built someone determined to thrive despite them. The sun setting over the Maldives still reminds me of that first vacation I took after everything unraveled. But now, watching sunsets from the Foundation's rooftop garden in downtown Chicago feels equally peaceful. Below, the city bustles with life, students rushing to class, workers heading home, families enjoying dinner. Each face represents potential, possibility, opportunity. Sometimes I wonder what my grandmother would think of everything that's happened. Did she know, in establishing that trust, how desperately her grandchildren would need its protection? Or did she simply recognize that wealth, when wielded properly, could become a force for good rather than greed? Her letter sits framed in my office, alongside photos of our beneficiaries and quotes about resilience. "The fortune is not yours to use as you please," she wrote. "It belongs to Marcus and Emma, held in trust with strict conditions to ensure they raise responsibly." She understood something my parents never did. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts but in the lives we touch and the legacy we leave behind. At the Foundation's 5th anniversary gala, a young woman approached me. She was graduating from medical school debt-free thanks to our support. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You've given me a future I never thought possible." In that moment, surrounded by hundreds of similar success stories, I finally understood what justice truly meant. Justice isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about transformation, taking pain and turning it into purpose, using betrayal as fuel for betterment, channeling anger into action. My parents tried to build character through cruelty. Instead, they built something far more powerful, a determination to rise above their darkness and create light. Looking around the crowded room, watching laughter and celebration replace struggle and sacrifice, I felt something I never expected: gratitude. Not for their actions but for the strength they inadvertently forced me to develop. Their experiment failed spectacularly, not because I broke under pressure but because I refused to conform to their expectations of brokenness. The Foundation continues growing, our reach expanding beyond what I ever imagined. Yet some things remain constant. I still visit Joe's diner occasionally, catching up with old friends and remembering where this journey began. Maria still keeps our offices running smoothly, her organizational skills rivaling any corporate executive. And every evening, I walk past the framed journal entry that started it all. To our perfect little family. And to Emma, wherever she is, still building that character. Only now, I understand what true character really means. It's not about surviving manufactured hardship or enduring unnecessary struggle. It's about choosing compassion over cruelty, action over apathy, creation over destruction. My parents thought they were teaching me strength through deprivation. Instead, they taught me the power of rising above darkness to create something meaningful. As I close my office door each night, looking out over the city lights, I remember their faces on the news, the shock and disbelief as their empire crumbled. They wanted to test my character. They got exactly what they asked for. Just not in the way they intended. Because sometimes the strongest response to cruelty isn't fighting back. It's building something beautiful from the ashes they left behind.